Hey guys, the Nintendo DSi was an interesting thing. It was, strictly speaking, a major upgrade to the DS Lite that came before it 3 years prior. It had cameras, a shop channel like the Wii, a brand new UI that made it so you didn't have to shut down after changing every setting, and it had Flipnote. Despite the new cameras and internet features, all the exclusives for the DSi, like Photo Dojo or Minis March Again, came from the DSiWare shop, and the DSiWare shop mostly consisted of small games that were like $8. Combine this with the fact that the DSi had no Game Boy Advance slot, and you get a situation where, if I already had a DS or DS Lite at the time, I wouldn't really be that compelled to upgrade to the DSi. Especially if I had Super Magic See the Future vision, and was able to tell that the 3DS, which was a proper upgrade to the DS, was only a couple years away. But anyway, the DS system as a whole is also a pretty interesting concept, and I remember at one point I really wanted there to be some kind of way to make my own games for it. I eventually did find out that someone made DS Game Maker, which was a clone of Game Maker that exported DS ROMs that you would put on a flash cart, but that's a topic for another day. Because one of those $8 DSiWare games that you were able to get from the DSi shop was a basic interpreter called Petit Computer. Petite Computer was released in 2011 by Smileboom and provides an interpreter for a version of BASIC called Smile Basic, which, by the way, is also the name of the 3DS sequel. Smile Basic is a complete programming language with arrays, flow control, for loops, and even ways to draw images onto the screen and take input from the DS. Petite Computer is, for all intents and purposes, a fantasy console like Pico 8. Except that it's on the DSi and it uses BASIC. Wait a minute, doesn't BASIC kinda suck? Why would anyone want to use this? Well, the only reason anyone would want to use BASIC on the DSi is because BASIC is the only programming language on the DSi. It's the equivalent of selling a bottle of Coke for $12 in a baseball stadium because you have a captive audience. But anyway, let's make some sort of game in Petite Computer. In this video, I'm going to make a small Space Invaders clone. Except without those barrier things because I didn't feel like implementing them. Space Invaders is a good game to make with this because Petite Computer already has some spaceships in its character inventory, so we can just draw the spaceships using print statements. Speaking of print statements, to position the cursor somewhere, you use the locate command, which lets you specify the X and Y coordinate of where you want to put the cursor, and then you use print to actually put the character there. Using that, we can declare a player X and player Y variable, and place the player there. Put this in a loop, and now we continuously draw the player to the screen. Yay. Oh no, oh god, the flicker! What's causing this and how do I get it to stop? Oh, that. We just need to turn on VSync to slow down the CPU, so it actually, get this, waits until it has finished drawing the frame before it starts drawing the next one. Crazy idea, I know. Also, did I mention that Petite Computer requires you to use the silly touchscreen keyboard?
No. But it's kinda obvious that you would need to use that. How else would you type things into a DS?
Using the keyboard from Learn with Pokemon Typing Adventure, of course.
Well, that's just a Bluetooth keyboard, and Petite Computer does not support Bluetooth keyboards.
Oh well, I guess we're stuck with this! Though, if you type the first letter or two of a command, you get suggestions, which makes it a bit easier. Though this really encourages variable names being stuff like X, rather than actually being descriptive, because then it takes too long to type. So now let's add user input, but first, we need to figure out what the command to actually do that is. Let's check the game's built-in manual, because surely it will contain a reference for all of Smile Basic's built-in functions and what they do, right? Right? Well, as it turns out, the manual is too busy spending time teaching you how a touchscreen works to actually contain a function reference. So instead, I found a function reference online to figure out how the button function works. As it turns out, the button function will spit out a binary number corresponding to which buttons are pressed at any given time. For example, the bit in the ones place represents if up on the D-pad is pressed, and 16 represents if the A button is pressed. Using this, we can AND the button call with the button code, and use that condition in an if-then statement, such as if button and 4, then player X equals player X minus 1. Wait a sec. For the if-then statement, how would we do more than one thing if the condition is true? Like maybe adding an additional check so that the player doesn't move into a negative position and go off screen. Oh, that's easy, and also incredibly ugly. We use subroutines! A subroutine is declared with a label like @pleft and ends with return. It contains some other code in the middle. To call a subroutine, you write go sub followed by the subroutine's name. When you call the subroutine, it runs the code inside of it, and when it hits return, it goes back to the place that it was.
So, this just seems like a code block with extra steps.
But anyway, now we have a moving player. Up next is the projectile. It's stored as two position variables, bx and by, because I didn't want to do a lot of touchscreen typing, both of which default to -1 when off screen. The bullet will have its position set to 1 square above the player on A press, and it will move upwards on a decrementing timer on loop where every few frames it just moves up 1 tile. It sets its positions to -1 again if it ever goes off screen. And lastly, we add a check on the A press to make sure that the projectile is off screen before setting its position. Now we need enemies to shoot with the projectile. These are going to be stored as several arrays containing the enemy's X and Y coordinates, as well as a flag for if the enemy is alive or not. Declaring an array in Smile Basic is done using dim, meaning declare in memory, followed by the array's size, which in this case will be 9999, to allow different levels to have different numbers of enemies. Wait a minute, I tried running my program with dim in it twice, and it crashed on the second time and said that it was already declared. What gives? Oh, that. You actually need to clear the memory before doing dim, since it doesn't start with a clean slate on program run. What? Why does it do that? Probably for debugging, so you can print or modify arrays in the shell and see what's going wrong. But anyway, the enemies will appear on a grid and follow a path where they alternate going left and right down the screen. This is done using a similar tick method to the bullet. And speaking of the bullet, when the bullet and an enemy have the same X and Y coordinate, and that enemy is alive, we turn its alive flag off and make the bullet disappear. If an alive enemy reaches the bottom of the screen where the player is, we call a game over subroutine, which shows a game over screen. Finally, if every enemy is marked as not alive, we show a level complete subroutine. So now we have a game loop. Hooray! Now we just need to add polish, like levels, score, and audio. The beep command has several beep sounds that can be used. Most of them are not beeps. We also have background music that we can play. So now we have a simple little Space Invaders clone. If you want to try it out on your own DSi, here's the QR code that you can scan to load the program onto your own DS. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
So, when making the QR code at literally the last possible moment when editing the video, I realized that you can use an SD card to store programs and then edit them on your actual computer. So, no DS touchscreen typing is actually required. So that was nice to learn after it was no longer useful. Anyway, shoutouts to iHashibami, Tyler Zenke, and all of these wonderful people for supporting the channel by becoming channel members. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Now go touch grass.